How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. We are officially in my favorite month of the year, October. It's time for some scary movies, some scary games, and some not scary Steam Deck news because I only have good news in this video. So the first thing I want to cover today is an interesting way to get a performance boost out of your Steam Deck that you'll actually notice. Second on the list, we're going to talk about how SteamOS just got way more official. And third, I checked out this new Steam Deck app on my iPhone that might be worth picking up. But yeah, let's jump into this first news story here, which is all about how you can improve performance on your Steam Deck with this mod. So we've talked about a few different mods over the years. There's some software-based ones, there's some hardware-based ones. The cool thing is both have been implemented by Valve officially with the Steam Deck OLED on the hardware side, and then on the software side, they've baked in some cool features people are using in updates to SteamOS. So Valve, they've been pretty on top of this, but I don't think they're gonna officially support this mod because what it is an aluminum backplate for your Steam Deck. So it has the back buttons, it has slots for your triggers. It looks exactly like the back plate that you already have, the plastic one that you would take off if you wanted to upgrade the SSD on your Steam Deck, but the vast majority of it is made of aluminum. Recently, a Reddit user named Cheater0 picked one of these up and decided to do a test between the plastic back plate and how it disperses heat and if that improves performance or degrades it, and then he put on this aluminum plate and did the exact same test. And he was very clear that he did no other hardware or software mods. It was a vanilla deck both times, the only difference being the plate that was on the back of the console. And the way that he tested this was to run the Outer Worlds on both decks with no user input for 3 hours. So they effectively had the exact same thing going on the screen. And I was honestly shocked in this article that I read about it when I saw the actual, numbers from this test. So first up, we got the fan that kicks up whenever the Steam Deck gets hot. So whenever you're doing something intensive or using higher settings on your Steam Deck, you'll hear that fan turn on. It used to be way louder than it is on the Steam Deck OLED, and they've also improved it in the LCD, so it's not really annoying, but you'll hear it kick on. And what this test found is with the aluminum backplate installed, the fan kicked on 35% less. So that's a pretty big drop off from what it was doing with the plastic backplate. And then looking at the GPU, it got a 38 megahertz boost, which results in like 2.6% of an increase in performance, and 2% isn't going to be a ton on a major gaming PC with like a 4090 and like an i9 processor in it, but on a lower spec handheld that is trying to pack everything into a handheld size chassis, having 2% better GPU performance, like you're scraping by with everything you can get, I think that's actually a noticeable improvement. And even though the GPU is running with better performance, with this aluminum backplate, it was running 12 degrees Celsius cooler. So you were getting more performance and the thing was running cooler. So maybe you could even squeeze out even more performance if you decided to overclock your Steam Deck or something like that. And the CPU temps also were improved. They were 13% lower and FPS was 11% better. Now, when you're in the like 30 to 40 FPS range, 11% isn't that much. It's just a couple of frames here or there. But as I always talk about when the Steam Deck LCD goes on sale, the reason I recommend the OLED over the LCD all the time is because you get a small percentage of an FPS boost with the Steam Deck OLED, but what it helps is the 1% lows. So, when you have the frame time graph up and you're running through a level in a game and then you see that spike of the frame rate where the FPS drops for 1 frame down to like 20 FPS and you notice it hitch, the Steam Deck OLED with its marginal increase in FPS performance doesn't have those stutters nearly as much as the Steam Deck LCD. So even though 11% of an FPS boost doesn't sound like that much on paper, if it reduces the 1% lows, it's going to be a noticeably better experience if you're addicted to watching Digital Foundry and you appreciate frame time more than overall FPS. Like me personally, I don't care if I can run a game between 110 and 140 FPS. I'd much rather lock it at a FPS level that it's going to stay at consistently because I don't like variation in frame rates. I like a completely solid, flat frame time graph. Like a dead guy's cardiograph. There's your Halloween spooky analogy. What the So with this aluminum backplate, it's performance improvements across the board. But because this is from AliExpress, not the most reputable place to pick these things up in the entire world, there are a few drawbacks. So this first one, I will definitely attribute to user error because I have had this issue with the plastic backplate on my Steam Deck LCD and my Steam Deck OLED. So he reported that unless he loosened the screws a little bit closest to the L1 and R1 bumpers, they would stick a little bit when he was pressing them. Again, that's something that I've experienced with my Steam Deck LCD, specifically my launch one and my OLED, when I had to take off the plastic back to check if my backplate was actually cracked, because that's happening a lot. To the limited edition model of the Steam Deck, and yes, it was cracked, I tightened the screws a little too much and I noticed that the bumpers were sticking. So yeah, I think this one's up to user error. The second thing though is definitely up to design, because they moved the back vent for the fans and also changed the shape of it, and that's bad because they're in a specific place for a reason. They want to create forced airflow that'll take air to other components on the Steam Deck besides the APU, so it'll cool down the charging port, it'll cool down areas that, you know, wouldn't be cooled down if the fan vent was in another place, and they moved it to a different place so it could cause problems not keeping your charging port cool or something like that. And finally is just the cost. So because this is on AliExpress and Temu and everything like that, there's a range of prices you could pay just based on what the seller is charging, because, you know, they drop ship everything over on these websites, and the person who charges the most will charge you less if you buy in bulk. The person who charges the least will get you on shipping. It's a whole scam type of game that I don't like playing. So the prices on this thing range from $100 to $200 depending on who you buy it from, and then you're gonna have to wait a very long time for the shipping. Like when I was in Nashville for my birthday, I was pretty drunk, I'm just gonna be honest, with my wife, and I saw this guy on Twitter who had a Toyota Tacoma RC car that he bought on Temu, and because it was my birthday, I decided to buy a Jeep Wrangler to match my new Jeep at the time, and it got to me in July. So yeah, that's the shipping times that you're dealing with on Temu and AliExpress. We've actually seen something similar to this before that didn't provide the exact same boost in performance, but actually did provide a boost. It was from JSOX, those cool people over there. They made a plastic backplate that had a square cut out of it to like take the heat from the APU and then like blast it out with a piece of aluminum. That actually improved performance as well. So that one's a little bit cheaper, and I think the brand is more reputable, but still, I think this is really cool. I would love to have an all aluminum Steam Deck. It would not be that much heavier because aluminum is light, and having a metal piece of tech would just be awesome, right? Like my Razer Blade or my MacBook Pro, why not make a Steam Deck that's made of aluminum? If Valve needs more ideas for a limited edition model that they can charge way more than they did for the other limited one, make it out of aluminum, make it super limited like analog so scalpers buy them all up and ruin everyone's fun. All right, next up here, let's talk about how SteamOS 3.0 just got more official. I know you guys love when I talk about Linux because I always get minor things wrong, and you let me know in the comments, which I appreciate because that's how I learn. So I'm going to be careful this time. Basically what's happening here is that SteamOS 3.0 is not like a built from the ground up operating system. It was built on top of Arch Linux, which is a fork of Linux that's developed by fans who just want to dedicate their time for no money. And that's totally legal and cool and everything like that. Linux is open source. They were cool with Valve using Arch Linux as the basis for SteamOS 3.0, but they've actually entered into an agreement where Valve can pay people from Arch Linux as freelancers to develop specific features that will make Arch Linux better. Because one of the biggest roadblocks when you're working on something out of the kindness of your heart is finding time to solve hard issues, right? Like you can fix all the little easy things when you have time at the end of the night, but if something's going to be super time intensive and take weeks or even months to improve and it's working kind of just fine as it is, I'd imagine that a lot of that stuff gets pushed to the back burner and then builds up in the background. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're doing it completely for free, right? Like if you're not getting paid for something and it's a hobby, you shouldn't do it to the point that it feels like work because it'll completely ruin your hobby. So now that Valve and Arch Linux have signed this agreement, that only means good things for SteamOS 3.0. It basically gives Valve a way to pay people who have intricate knowledge of this release of Linux because they're the ones who built it, and they're just going to get an improvement on their back end, because if they have to figure everything out by deconstructing the operating system or, you know, hiring someone from Arch Linux over at Valve, that would just create problems, because then you're losing someone from Arch Linux who is working on the actual base operating system, who's then working on the fork of it for Valve, which is a fork of a fork. Why not just enter a handshake agreement where you can pay people from Arch Linux to help you solve your problems? It just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, while game budgets are exploding, dev time is taking 5 to 7 years, studios are closing down left and right, it's nice to see a big company like like Valve, instead of trying to screw over the people they built their SteamOS fork on top of, entering an agreement with them where they can give them more time and resources to actually make the product better, which I think is great. All right, that brings us to the third news story here, which is an app that you might want to check out on your iPhone or Android phone that will make your Steam Deck experience just a little bit easier. So this app is called Deck Filter, and what it does is it shows you your entire Steam library. It pulls stats from ProtonDB, how long to beat. It gives you a rating from ProtonDB. It's just like a collection of all the different websites that you probably use if you're a Steam Deck gamer to either find settings or figure out if a game is going to run on Linux, or, you know, just figure out how long a game is going to take you to beat. And the reason I'm talking about it today is because of one really cool feature they have where you can click on any game in your Steam library and click settings at the bottom, and it'll automatically source from ShareDeck, Steam Deck HQ, and Overkill.wtf the specific settings that they have found work best on that specific game with the Steam Deck. And the way it works is really cool. It gives you a brief rundown of the generic settings. It tells you the TDP and the wattage and everything that you should use. And I like that it shows you all the different websites, because for different games, you know, different sites have better settings. Like Overkill.wtf, Timo from the Deckverse does a lot of their settings breakdowns, and this dude goes super granular with it, and he does a lot of tricks to just get the perfect golden 40 FPS in a lot of games. So stuff like Horizon Forbidden West, for example, I like using his settings. And then for indie games where, you know, they weren't tested on the Steam Deck and, you know, they might have some weird setting enabled that stops them from running right, Steam Deck HQ is a great source for that. And if you just want a quick way to see if a game is going to run, ShareDeck is great for that too, because it does the same thing as ProtonDB. But if you want ProtonDB stats, every game has a listed little link there as well. And if you want the full breakdown from all those different websites, you just click on the little box for that specific website on that specific game. It'll take you right to the page, and you can see the full article from Steam Deck HQ or the ShareDeck settings that they pulled, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. For those of you who are still here and you want some scary games to play on your Steam Deck this Halloween, I just picked up a game called Withering Rooms. It's a 2.5D Metroidvania roguelite that is Souls game inspired combat. And even though it has a lot of subgenres, everything sort of clicks together. The art style, it's cool, like it's very inspired, but the actual graphics themselves, I think, could use a little bit more work. But regardless of that, it's very fun to play, and it's got that nice spooky vibe like classic Halloween, you know, 90s vintage decorations, or that Mytho America account on Twitter. It feels very nostalgic when I play it, and I think it's a great game for the Steam Deck. There's another survival horror game that just came out. It's an indie game called Hollow Body. It's heavily inspired by Silent Hill, and it runs pretty good on the Steam Deck. When you're in interiors, you get basically 60 FPS across the board, and when you go outside, it can drop into the high 20s, but the developer has already done 5 patches on it, and it's only been out for less than a month, so it could be better in some time. It's only 3 hours, and I think the cost is a little steep, but it is a cool game, and it has a really inspired art style as well. Another game I mentioned quite a lot on the channel is Conscript. It's a Resident Evil 1 inspired World War I horror game that is awesome. I don't want to spoil anything in it. I highly recommend checking that one out. And then way earlier in the year, a game that's also inspired by Resident Evil called Crow Country released. If you're looking for like a 5-hour game you can play while you have AMC Fear Fest on, that has a little bit more of a cartoony art style, but is very original nonetheless. Can't recommend Crow Country enough. And then the last thing I want to cover is I said I was 31 in my last video, and a lot of people commented that they were way older than me. They were saying they're like 40 or 50, and they were like, "You're young," and that made me feel good. But then there were a couple other comments where people noticed that I look older than I am. I know that it's true for sure. The reason is I had insane acne in high school, like really, really bad acne, and I still have like scarring from it, and I have excessive dryness. I never took Accutane or anything like that. And unfortunately, I would go to the dermatologist and they would give me these, you know, prescription grade acne cleansers that would just dry the hell out of my skin and stop oil production. And then when I met my wife in college, she had the idea that maybe my skin was already too dry and that's why it was producing so much oil. So I started moisturizing, and that basically cured my acne. But by that point, way too late, got all this scarring, got this redness on my nose. I've been in and out of the dermatologist for like 15 years at this point, and nothing works. So I still moisturize all the time. I've been working out a lot. I quit alcohol a long time ago, and I drink a lot of water. So yeah, I might look 52, even though I'm 31. At least I don't look 60 like I could if I didn't do skincare, drink a lot of water, make a lot of kale and protein smoothies, and eat right. But you know, the only reason I'm talking about this is because it takes a wake-up call sometimes. Like, I used to be pretty fat. If you look at way back when I started this channel, I was pretty overweight, and then I started hitting the gym really hard. I cut alcohol out completely almost, and then now I don't even drink it at all. And I started drinking a lot more water, and I think, like, go back to one of the videos from when I started the channel. I think I look a lot better than I did. Like, the wake up call for me was the video I did at Austin Evans' studio with the ROG Ally. It's the only video on this channel where I'm in the thumbnail. And yeah, I feel like I look like complete shit in that thumbnail. And despite the fact that I look older than I am, I feel like I look a lot better now. At least I feel way better now than I did back then. But yeah, I've been kicking around this idea of answering some comments or questions at the end of the video. So if you have anything you want me to talk about, whether it's Steam Deck related or not, I guess, let me know down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.